The glint of metal was unmistakable. It caught the afternoon sun, a cold, hard sparkle that made the air suddenly thick and heavy, like trying to breathe underwater. Ashley, usually so calm, so collected, felt a prickle of alarm. It wasn't exactly fear, not the kind that made your legs shake or your stomach churn, but a deep, powerful awareness that something had gone terribly, terribly wrong. Brenda, the president of the Homeowners Association, stood there, her face a mask of furious righteousness, her eyes narrowed like a snake's. And in her trembling hand, pointed directly at Ashley, was a small, silver handgun. "You think you can just ignore the rules, don't you, little girl?" Brenda's voice, which was usually a high, whiny sound, was now a low, dangerous growl, like a dog warning you to stay away. Ashley's eyes, normally filled with a quiet strength that made people feel safe, widened just a tiny bit. This was not about a messy trash can, or a bush that grew too big, or a cheerfully painted mailbox. This was real. This was a moment that could change everything. And in that terrifying moment, with the shiny gun pointing right at her, Ashley knew she had to make a choice that would decide what happened next. The neighborhood, usually so peaceful and full of gentle sounds, seemed to hold its breath. Everyone watching felt the silence, a heavy blanket of quiet. What would Ashley do now? What could anyone do when a grown-up pulled out a gun over something so small? Just a few months earlier, the Miller family had packed up their old life and moved to Willow Creek. Sarah, the mom, was a warm and kind woman with a bright smile that could light up a room. Tom, the dad, was a steady, calm presence, always ready with a quiet joke or a helping hand. And then there was Ashley, their daughter. She was a quiet girl, not loud or flashy, but she had a deep, strong spirit that shone through her actions. They had chosen Willow Creek because it looked like a perfect place to live. The houses were neat and pretty, with green lawns that looked like velvet carpets. The streets were clean, and there were big, leafy trees everywhere. It seemed like a dream community, the kind of place where kids could ride bikes safely and neighbors would wave hello. Their first few days were filled with the happy bustle of unpacking boxes and arranging furniture. Ashley helped her mom carry things and her dad assemble shelves, always humming a quiet tune. She loved how the sunshine streamed into her new room. One warm afternoon, just as they finished putting away the last box, there was a knock on the door. Sarah opened it to find a woman standing there, holding a fancy plate of cookies. "Welcome to Willow Creek," the woman chirped, her smile a little too wide, a little too bright. "I'm Brenda. Brenda Harrison. I'm the president of the Homeowners Association." Brenda had perfectly coiffed blonde hair and wore a crisp, tailored suit, even though it was just a Tuesday afternoon. She introduced herself with a flourish, like she was announcing royalty. Sarah, always friendly, invited her in. Brenda stepped inside, her eyes darting around the living room, taking in every detail. She complimented the Millers on their choice of home, but then, her smile tightened just a bit. "Now, I don't mean to be a stickler," Brenda began, her voice taking on a slightly sharper tone, "but I noticed your welcome mat is a bit vibrant. Our community standards suggest muted tones, you know, to maintain the aesthetic harmony. And your mail post, while charming, isn't quite the approved shade of white. We have a very specific paint code." Sarah blinked, a little taken aback. They had just moved in. They hadn't even had time to think about welcome mats or mail posts. Tom, sensing Sarah's surprise, stepped forward. "Oh, we just got here, Brenda," he said, his voice calm. "We'll get to it, don't worry. We're happy to follow the rules." Brenda's smile returned, even brighter than before, but her eyes held a hint of something cold. "Excellent. That's the spirit we like to see in Willow Creek. Rules keep our property values high, after all." She handed Sarah a thick packet of papers. "This is our HOA handbook. Please read it thoroughly. It covers everything from shrub height to approved outdoor decor. The Millers exchanged a look after Brenda left. It was a strange welcome, but they shrugged it off. Maybe Brenda was just a bit enthusiastic about rules. Ashley, meanwhile, had quickly found her rhythm in the new neighborhood. She had a quiet intensity about her, a way of focusing on tasks that was almost unusual for someone her age. She was incredibly disciplined, always waking up early to jog, even before the sun was fully up. She'd do strange, silent exercises in the backyard that looked like a dancer's movements mixed with something more purposeful. But what really stood out about Ashley was her kindness. She had a quiet strength that made her notice things others didn't. She'd see an elderly neighbor struggling with heavy bags and be there to help before they even asked. She'd pick up litter on her walks, not because someone told her to, but because she cared about keeping the neighborhood beautiful. She seemed to carry a calm that rubbed off on others, making them feel at ease. One sunny morning, Sarah decided to plant some cheerful sunflowers in a small flower bed near their front porch. She loved their bright faces and how they tracked the sun. Ashley helped her dig the holes and carefully place the seeds. "They'll look so pretty, Mom," Ashley said, her eyes sparkling. A week later, a terse letter arrived from the HOA. It was from Brenda, of course. It stated, in very formal words, that the sunflowers exceeded the approved flora height limits and were disruptive to neighborhood aesthetics. Sarah sighed. "Seriously? Sunflowers?" she muttered. Tom just shook his head. They loved their sunflowers, but they didn't want trouble. So, with a bit of a heavy heart, Sarah pruned the sunflowers, cutting off their tall, hopeful heads. Ashley helped, gently gathering the cut blooms. "Maybe we can put these in a vase, Mom," she suggested softly, always finding a way to make things better. "Or maybe," she mused, her brow furrowed in thought, "if there was a community garden, we could plant the seeds there, where they wouldn't bother anyone." It showed her positive outlook, always looking for solutions rather than just being sad. Another time, Tom decided to hang a small, tasteful wind chime on their back patio. It made a soft, tinkling sound when the breeze blew, very gentle and calming. It wasn't loud at all. But within days, another letter arrived from Brenda. This one cited the "no excessive noise-generating ornaments" rule. Tom was truly frustrated this time. "Excessive? It sounds like fairies dancing," he exclaimed, holding the chime up to his ear. But again, to keep the peace, he took it down. Ashley came over and put her hand on his arm. "It's okay, Dad," she said, her voice a comforting whisper. "We can still enjoy music. We can play our favorite songs inside, or maybe find a tiny fountain for the patio. The sound of water is always beautiful, and it won't bother anyone." She always had a way of making people feel better, finding a different path forward. Ashley also started helping Mrs. Davison, an elderly neighbor who lived a few houses down. Mrs. Davison was a sweet lady but struggled with her groceries and moving her heavy recycling bins to the curb each week. Ashley, without saying a word, just started doing it. She'd wait until Mrs. Davison brought the bins out, then quietly, swiftly, she'd roll them down the driveway and place them neatly at the curb on trash day. She'd also carry Mrs. Davison's heavy grocery bags from the car to her kitchen, always with a polite smile and a quiet, "Anything else, Mrs. Davison?" Brenda, meanwhile, watched from her window. She saw Ashley's helpfulness, but instead of seeing kindness, she seemed to view it as unauthorized activity. She saw a young girl moving around, doing things that weren't explicitly in the HOA handbook, and it made her suspicious. To Brenda, kindness was a messy, unpredictable thing that could break rules. The Millers, still hoping to foster a friendly spirit in their new home, thought a neighborhood block party would be a wonderful idea. Sarah approached Brenda with the suggestion, her voice full of enthusiasm. "It would be so nice for everyone to get to know each other, Brenda. Just a simple potluck, maybe some lawn games. Brenda pursed her lips. A block party, she asked, as if Sarah had suggested setting off fireworks in the living room. Absolutely not. We have strict rules against unapproved gatherings in common areas due to liability concerns. And noise. And parking. It simply won't do. She waved her hand dismissively. Sarah's shoulders slumped. Ashley, who had been listening quietly, felt a pang of sadness. She had imagined kids laughing, adults chatting, music playing. But Brenda's word was final. Still, Ashley decided, if she couldn't bring the whole neighborhood together with a party, she would find other ways. She would continue her small acts of kindness, like helping Mrs. Davison, showing that community could be built one kind act at a time. These small acts of kindness were Ashley's way of making the world a better place, even in a neighborhood full of rules. She saw a flyer at the local grocery store about the Willow Creek Animal Shelter. They were struggling, needing money for food and medicine for the animals. Ashley loved animals, and her heart went out to them. She thought, I can help. The next Saturday was a bright, sunny day, perfect for her plan. Ashley woke up early, with a quiet determination. She decided to set up a small, innocent lemonade stand. She mixed big pitchers of tangy lemonade, just the right amount of sweet and sour. She also baked some delicious, chewy chocolate chip cookies. She chose a spot on their own front lawn, right by the sidewalk, where people passing by could easily see it. It was clearly on their private property, not on any common ground. She drew a simple, colorful sign with crayons, "Lemonade for Paws, all proceeds to Willow Creek Animal Shelter." She even drew a happy little dog with a wagging tail. Initially, neighbors were charmed. Kids flocked to the stand, their eyes wide at the sight of the cookies and the happy dog on the sign. They bought lemonade and happily handed over their allowance money. Even some adults stopped by, smiling and praising Ashley's initiative. "That's so wonderful of you, Ashley," one woman said, dropping a $5 bill into the collection jar. "What a great idea," a man added, taking 2 lemonades. The jar slowly began to fill with money. Ashley felt a quiet joy, knowing she was making a difference. But then, as the afternoon wore on, a dark shadow fell over the happy scene. Brenda, on one of her regular patrols of the neighborhood, spotted the lemonade stand. Her perfectly made-up face darkened. She stopped dead in her tracks, her eyes narrowing to slits. She didn't see a child's charity project. She didn't see kindness or community spirit. She saw a violation. She saw a challenge to her authority, a commercial enterprise, on private property without HOA approval, even though it was clearly for charity. Her footsteps became heavy as she stormed over, her face turning a blotchy red. "What in the world do you think you're doing here, young lady?" she shrieked, her voice loud enough to make several people turn their heads. Ashley, standing behind her little table, remained calm. Her face didn't show any fear, only a steady, unwavering look. "Hi, Brenda," she said politely, her voice soft but clear. "I'm raising money for the Willow Creek Animal Shelter. All the money goes to the animals. I don't care what it's for." Brenda practically yelled, her voice getting higher and shriller. "This is an unapproved commercial venture. On private property. Do you have any idea how many rules you are breaking?" Her hands flew up in the air, emphasizing every word. A few neighbors who had been buying lemonade paused, looking uncomfortable. Ashley patiently tried to explain. "It's just a lemonade stand, Brenda. For charity. It's on our lawn, and it's only for today." Brenda seemed to grow even angrier at Ashley's calm demeanor. The more respectful Ashley was, the redder Brenda's face became. She looked around at the gathering neighbors, whose expressions ranged from confusion to disapproval of Brenda's outburst. Brenda clearly felt her control slipping, her power being challenged by a polite teenager and a few pitchers of lemonade. "I'll have you know, this is a direct violation. I will fine your parents, Ashley. I will make an example of you and your family. This neighborhood will not be a circus of unapproved activities." Ashley's expression remained steadfast. She spoke with a quiet firmness. "I understand your concerns about rules, Brenda. But this is about helping innocent animals. It's about kindness. We're not hurting anyone." Brenda's eyes bulged. "Kindness? Kindness doesn't pay the bills. Rules do. You think you can just disregard everything I've built here?" She was trembling now, not from fear, but from a rage that seemed to shake her whole body. She took a step closer to the small stand, her hand dipping into her large handbag, rummaging frantically. She was completely losing her temper in front of everyone, unable to bear the quiet resistance and the silent support Ashley was getting from the other neighbors. And then, she pulled it out. The small, silver handgun. The same one that would later catch the afternoon sun, sending a cold, hard sparkle through the air, freezing time itself. The small, silver handgun glinted, a stark, terrifying point of light in the bright afternoon. It was aimed directly at Ashley, and a hush fell over Willow Creek, thick and immediate. Neighbors who had been watching the argument now froze, their faces turning pale. Brenda's hand trembled slightly, but her eyes were fixed on Ashley, wild with a fury that seemed to know no bounds. "You will pack this up right now, young lady," Brenda shrieked, her voice cracking with rage. "This instant. Or I swear, you'll regret it." Ashley, however, did not flinch. Her body remained perfectly still, her breathing even. Her gaze was steady, meeting Brenda's frantic glare without a hint of fear. It was an almost unnatural calm, like a still pond reflecting a stormy sky. She simply looked at the gun, then back at Brenda's eyes, a quiet question in her own. Her stillness seemed to infuriate Brenda even more. "Don't you dare look at me like that," Brenda hissed, taking a shaky step forward. "You think you're so smart, don't you? Breaking rules, causing trouble." Before Brenda could say another word, Tom, Ashley's dad, moved. He had been watching, stunned, from the porch, but the sight of the gun snapped him into action. He strode quickly but calmly towards the scene, his jaw tight. "Brenda, what are you doing?" "Put that down," he commanded, his voice deep and firm, cutting through the tension. Sarah, Ashley's mom, was right behind him, her hand flying to her mouth, a gasp escaping her lips. Mrs. Davison, who had been watching from her own yard, let out a small whimper of distress. Brenda's head snapped towards Tom. "Stay out of this, Tom Miller. Your daughter is a menace. She's undermining everything the HOA stands for. She's raising money for charity, Brenda," Sarah cried, her voice trembling but gaining strength. "She's on our property. You can't just pull a gun on a child." The other neighbors, slowly recovering from their shock, began to murmur. A few started stepping forward, their expressions ranging from disbelief to outrage. "Brenda, that's too far," someone called out from the small crowd. "You need to put that away," another shouted. Brenda, suddenly surrounded by angry faces and the unwavering gaze of Ashley, seemed to falter. Her hand, still holding the gun, wavered. Her eyes darted from Tom's stern face to Sarah's tear-filled eyes, then to the growing group of neighbors. The fury in her eyes was slowly replaced by a flicker of fear, mixed with defiance. With a huff, she lowered the gun slightly, not putting it away, but pointing it at the ground next to her foot. "This isn't over," she snarled, her voice losing its previous power, shrinking back into its usual whine. "I will see to it that you are all heavily fined. You will regret this day." With that, she spun on her heel and stomped off, clutching the gun close to her side, her back stiff with defeated anger. The air slowly began to feel lighter, as if a huge weight had been lifted. Tom immediately went to Ashley, pulling her into a tight hug. Sarah joined them, burying her face in Ashley's hair, tears finally flowing freely. "Are you okay, sweetheart? Are you hurt?" Sarah whispered, checking Ashley over as if she expected to find a scratch or a bruise. Ashley just nodded, her calm eyes meeting her parents'. "I'm fine, Mom. Really?" Her voice was steady, as if nothing out of the ordinary had just happened. The neighbors slowly approached, their faces etched with concern. "That was absolutely insane," one man, Mr. Henderson, said, shaking his head. "I can't believe she did that." Mrs. Davison, her voice raspy, added, "She's gone too far this time. Something has to be done." Tom thanked everyone for their support, and slowly, the small crowd dispersed, buzzing with disbelief and anger. The Millers packed up the lemonade stand, the joy of the charity event overshadowed by the terrifying incident. Inside their home, the initial relief gave way to a simmering anger. "I'm calling the police," Tom declared, his hands balled into fists. "We can't let her get away with this." Sarah nodded emphatically. They spent the rest of the evening talking to the police. 2 officers arrived, listened carefully to their story, and took down all the details, their faces serious. They assured the Millers they would investigate, but they also explained that proving intent with a gun could be complicated, especially if Brenda claimed it was for self-defense or an accident. The officers took the names of the neighbors who had witnessed the event, promising to follow up with them. It felt good to report it, to feel like they were doing something, but a knot of worry remained in Sarah's stomach. Would Brenda truly face consequences? Or would she just find another way to make their lives miserable? Ashley sat quietly during all this, listening intently, her eyes missing nothing. She didn't look scared, but rather thoughtful, as if she was piecing together a very complex puzzle. The next few days in Willow Creek were filled with an odd tension. Neighbors still stopped by the Millers' house to offer support, bringing over casseroles and kind words. Everyone agreed Brenda had crossed a line. But Brenda herself was nowhere to be seen. Her house remained quiet, her curtains drawn. It was unsettling, like waiting for a storm to break. The Millers tried to go back to their routine, but every time they stepped outside, they found themselves glancing towards Brenda's house, wondering what she was planning. Ashley, despite the recent scare, continued her acts of kindness. She visited Mrs. Davison, making sure she was all right after the frightening incident. She helped Mrs. Davison clean up her garden, weeding and planting new flowers that Mrs. Davison had been too weak to manage. Ashley's calm presence seemed to soothe the older woman, whose hands still trembled slightly when she poured tea. "You're such a good girl, Ashley," Mrs. Davison murmured, a grateful smile on her face. "A true ray of sunshine in this neighborhood." Ashley simply smiled back, her eyes full of quiet understanding. One afternoon, a few days after the gun incident, Ashley was on her way home from Mrs. Davison's house. She was walking past the community park, a lovely green space with a playground and winding walking paths, a place usually bustling with kids and dog walkers. Today, it was strangely empty. As she walked, she noticed something unusual. A group of teenagers, older than her, probably high school students, were gathered near the edge of the park, close to the quiet stream that flowed through Willow Creek. They looked rough, their clothes baggy and their caps pulled low. They had spray paint cans in their hands, and they were laughing loudly, spraying bright, ugly graffiti onto the park's wooden gazebo and the side of the little bridge. Ashley stopped, her usual calm replaced by a flicker of annoyance. This was their community park, a place for everyone to enjoy. These teens were destroying it. She watched for a moment, her mind quickly assessing the situation. There were 4 of them, all bigger than her. They hadn't noticed her yet. Most people would have turned and walked away, or maybe found an adult. But Ashley was different. She had a deep sense of right and wrong, and she hated to see good things ruined. She took a deep breath, her shoulders squaring just slightly. This was a smaller, less immediate threat than a gun, but it was still a challenge, a disregard for the peace and beauty of her new home. She started walking towards them, her footsteps quiet on the gravel path. As she got closer, one of the teens, a tall boy with a sneer on his face, looked up. He saw her, a lone girl, walking towards them. He nudged his friends, and they all turned, their laughter dying down, replaced by curious, challenging stares. "Well, what do we have here?" The tall boy drawled, a can of blue spray paint still in his hand. "Looks like someone got lost." His friend snickered. Ashley stopped a few feet away, her hands relaxed at her sides. Her voice was clear and steady, cutting through the silence. "You shouldn't be doing that," she said, her eyes looking directly at the graffiti on the gazebo. "This is our park. You're ruining it for everyone." The tall boy laughed, a harsh, unpleasant sound. "Oh, really? And what are you gonna do about it, little girl? Call your mommy?" He took a step towards her, trying to look big and scary. His friends moved closer too, forming a loose circle, their eyes glinting with mischief and a hint of threat. This was the moment. What would Ashley do now? The tall boy with the spray paint took another step toward Ashley, his friends moving in closer, creating a loose circle around her. His grin was wide and mocking. "Oh, really? And what are you gonna do about it, little girl? Call your mommy?" He chuckled, a harsh, unpleasant sound, and his friends snickered behind him. The air crackled with their unfriendly energy. Ashley's gaze remained steady. Her hands were still relaxed at her sides, but her body was ready. She didn't raise her voice, but her words were firm and clear. "This is a public park. People come here to relax and enjoy the peace. What you're doing is disrespectful to everyone who lives here." The boy rolled his eyes, clearly annoyed by her calm bravery. "Disrespectful? Listen to Miss Perfect here. We're just having some fun. What's it to ya?" He gestured with the spray paint can, almost daring her to react. "It's vandalism," Ashley stated simply, her voice unwavering. "And it's against the law." Another boy, who had been painting a messy symbol on the bridge, scoffed. "Oh, look out, guys, we got a cop in training." He took a step forward, his chest puffed out. "You gonna arrest us, little girl?" Ashley's eyes, usually so gentle, now held a glint of something sharper, something disciplined. She wasn't scared. She was assessing them, taking in their movements, their attitudes. She knew these kinds of situations. She had learned how to handle them, not with anger, but with smart moves and a clear mind. "I'm not here to arrest anyone," Ashley replied, her voice still quiet but carrying a surprising weight. "I'm here to ask you to stop. And to clean up this mess." The tall boy burst out laughing, a loud, booming sound that echoed in the quiet park. "Clean it up? You're joking, right? We're not cleaning anything. You clean it if it bothers you so much." He stepped even closer, trying to intimidate her, making himself seem bigger. "Now, run along, before you get hurt." Ashley didn't move. Her posture was relaxed, but she was like a spring coiled tight, ready for anything. She looked at each of the boys in turn, her gaze steady, serious. "I'm not going anywhere until you stop." The tension in the air thickened. The boys exchanged glances, surprised by her stubbornness. They had expected her to cry or run away. This was new. The tall boy's smirk faded, replaced by a frown. He was used to people backing down. "All right, tough girl," he sneered, raising the spray paint can. "Maybe we need to teach you a lesson." He shook the can, the ball inside rattling ominously, and aimed it at the pristine green grass near Ashley's feet, as if to show her what he could do. Suddenly, without warning, Ashley moved. It wasn't a wild, panicked movement. It was swift, precise, and incredibly fast. In a blur, she stepped to the side, then her hand shot out, not to grab, but to tap the boy's wrist with surprising force. The spray paint can flew from his grasp, tumbling to the ground with a clatter. It happened so quickly that the boys, and even Ashley herself, seemed momentarily stunned. The tall boy stared at his empty hand, then at the can on the ground. His face, which had been full of bravado, now looked confused and a little angry. "Hey! What was that?" he yelled, looking at Ashley with sudden respect mixed with rage. Ashley's stance was still calm, her eyes watchful. "I told you to stop," she said, her voice a little colder now. The boys looked at each other, then back at Ashley. This wasn't just some little girl. There was something about her, a quiet power they hadn't expected. For a moment, they just stood there, unsure. Then, the tall boy, humiliated in front of his friends, lunged at her. But Ashley was ready. She dodged his clumsy grab with ease, her movements flowing like water. She didn't fight back with punches or kicks. Instead, she used clever moves she had learned, moves that gently redirected his energy. She stepped past him, then gently pushed his shoulder, making him stumble forward, off balance. He wasn't hurt, but he was clumsy, looking foolish. His friends stared, their eyes wide. This was not how fights usually went. "Leave the park," Ashley commanded, her voice suddenly sharper, echoing with a quiet authority that surprised even her. "And don't come back." The boys, confused and outmaneuvered, looked at each other. The tall boy, frustrated and embarrassed, glared at Ashley one last time, then mumbled something to his friends. They picked up their fallen spray cans, shot angry glances at Ashley, and then, slowly, sullenly, they walked away, disappearing into the trees at the edge of the park. Ashley watched them go, her body finally relaxing completely once they were out of sight. She then walked over to the graffiti, sighing. It was a big mess, but she knew she could clean it. She always found a way. The quiet of Willow Creek was both a blessing and a new kind of challenge for Ashley. After the incident at the park, she felt a subtle shift in how people saw her, even without knowing the full story of what happened with the teenagers. Neighbors who usually offered a quick wave now paused, a lingering curiosity in their eyes. Mrs. Davison, who had heard about the park from someone else, looked at Ashley with a new kind of awe, whispering about her brave heart. Ashley, however, didn't seek attention. She just kept living her life, finding small ways to make a difference. She started quietly cleaning the graffiti in the park bit by bit, scrubbing it with cleaners her mom bought, doing it when no one was around. It was a slow process, but little by little, the ugly colors faded, and the beautiful wood of the gazebo began to show through again. Life at home felt a bit strange too. Tom and Sarah were still reeling from the gun incident with Brenda. They had gone to the police, but the process was slow and frustrating. The officers had said they were investigating, but Brenda remained unseen, her house still and silent. The lack of an immediate outcome left a lingering worry. Every unexpected sound, every sudden knock at the door, made them jump. They tried to act normal for Ashley's sake, but the fear was there, just beneath the surface. They'd often look at Ashley, their eyes filled with a mix of fierce protectiveness and a quiet wonder at her unchanging calm. They knew she was strong, but they didn't quite understand the depth of it. Ashley, for her part, tried to help her parents relax. She'd bring them cups of tea, play quiet board games with them in the evenings, and talk about her day with a cheerful lightness that sometimes fooled them into thinking everything was perfectly fine. She even started leaving little notes around the house, little drawings of happy animals or funny jokes, just to make them smile. She understood that fear could make people feel heavy, and she wanted to lift that weight, even if only for a moment. One sunny afternoon, a few weeks after the gun incident, Ashley was helping Mrs. Davison with her garden. Mrs. Davison loved roses, but her hands weren't as strong as they used to be, and the thorny bushes were hard to manage. Ashley carefully pruned the bushes, wearing thick gloves, making sure to cut away the dead blooms so the new ones could grow. As she worked, she listened to Mrs. Davison tell stories about her life, about the old days in Willow Creek before the HOA was so strict. Mrs. Davison often mentioned how much she missed the old community potlucks and bake sales, the simple ways neighbors used to connect. "It's all so different now," Mrs. Davison sighed, watching Ashley trim a particularly thorny branch. "Brenda and her rules, she's turned everything upside down. It's like we're all afraid to even say hello sometimes, for fear of breaking some unspoken rule." Ashley nodded, thinking about the lemonade stand, about the park. "Kindness isn't a rule, Mrs. Davison," Ashley said softly, "but it's one of the most important things." Mrs. Davison smiled, a genuine, warm smile. "You're right, dear. You truly are." As they finished in the garden, a small group of children from the neighborhood ran past, giggling and playing tag. They stopped by Mrs. Davison's fence, their eyes wide with admiration for Ashley. "Hi, Ashley," one little girl, Lily, called out. "Did you really make the bad teenagers leave the park?" Ashley smiled. "They just needed a reminder to be respectful," she said, downplaying it, not wanting to scare the children. Another boy, Leo, piped up. "My mom says Brenda is really mean. She yells at everyone for everything." His little brow was furrowed with worry. Ashley felt a pang of sadness. These children were growing up in a neighborhood where the adult who was supposed to lead them was teaching them fear, not kindness. She realized that Brenda's influence went beyond just rules. It was creating a tense, unwelcoming atmosphere for everyone, especially the youngest ones. She saw how the children looked at her, seeking reassurance, and she knew she had to do something to show them that being kind and strong was possible, even when facing someone difficult like Brenda. She came up with an idea that evening, an idea born from Mrs. Davison's longing for community and the children's unspoken worries. She didn't want another big, official event that Brenda could shut down. She wanted something small, gentle, and utterly undeniable in its goodness. Something that would spread kindness quietly, like ripples in a pond. The next morning, Ashley began to prepare. She gathered small, colorful flower pots, potting soil, and packets of easy-to-grow flower seeds, marigolds, zinnias, and pansies, flowers that brought simple joy. She worked quietly in their garage, transforming it into a temporary potting station. Her parents watched, curious but not asking too many questions, trusting Ashley's quiet determination. She created little cards to go with each pot, handwritten with simple, encouraging messages, "A little bit of sunshine for your day," or "May your garden grow with kindness." She even drew tiny smiley faces on some of them. Her plan was to leave these potted flowers on neighbors' doorsteps, a silent, anonymous act of kindness, a little burst of color and hope in the tightly controlled world of Willow Creek. She especially planned to leave one for Brenda, not as a challenge, but as a silent message of peace and an offering of kindness. Perhaps, she thought, even Brenda might have a moment of softness if she received something beautiful without expectation. That evening, just as the sun began to set, painting the sky in soft oranges and purples, Ashley put her plan into action. She put on a dark hoodie, not to hide, but just to be less noticeable. She carefully placed a handful of the small potted flowers into a reusable grocery bag. Her heart felt light with purpose. She stepped out into the quiet twilight, the air cool and fresh. She moved silently from house to house, placing a potted flower on each doorstep, ringing the doorbell softly, and then quickly, quietly, stepping back into the shadows, making sure she wasn't seen. She imagined the smiles on faces the next morning, the small surprise that would greet her neighbors. It was a secret mission of joy. She delivered them to Mrs. Davison, to the Hendersons, to the family with the little kids who had visited her lemonade stand. Each delivery was like dropping a tiny pebble into a still pool, hoping for widespread ripples of happiness. She saved Brenda's house for last. As she approached, she felt a familiar knot of tension, but she pushed it away. This was about kindness, not fear. She walked up Brenda's perfectly manicured pathway, placed a vibrant marigold on her porch, right next to the polished brass knocker, and gently pressed the doorbell. As the quiet chime echoed, Ashley turned to leave, disappearing into the deepening shadows of the evening. She felt a profound sense of peace. The mission was complete. But as she was walking away, just as she was nearing the corner of Brenda's house, a harsh, bright light suddenly pierced the darkness. A powerful spotlight from Brenda's porch clicked on, flooding the yard with blinding white light. Ashley froze. Then, a sharp, angry voice sliced through the night, a voice she knew all too well, trembling with rage. "I knew it. I knew you wouldn't leave me alone. What are you doing on my property?" Brenda's front door burst open. Her shadow, long and menacing in the harsh light, stretched across the lawn towards Ashley. But it wasn't just Brenda. Behind her, a towering figure stood, a silhouette that blocked out the hallway light, massive and imposing. And in the figure's hand, a very big, very real-looking rifle. A powerful spotlight from Brenda's porch clicked on, flooding the yard with blinding white light, and Ashley froze. A sharp, angry voice sliced through the night, trembling with rage. "I knew it. I knew you wouldn't leave me alone. What are you doing on my property?" Brenda's front door burst open. Her shadow, long and menacing in the harsh light, stretched across the lawn towards Ashley. But it wasn't just Brenda. Behind her, a towering figure stood, a silhouette that blocked out the hallway light, massive and imposing. And in the figure's hand, a very big, very real-looking rifle. Ashley's eyes immediately focused on the rifle. It was a hunting rifle, the kind used for large game, not something you'd expect to see in a suburban neighborhood. Her mind, quick and analytical, assessed the situation. The figure behind Brenda was a man, large and broad-shouldered, clearly not someone to mess with. He held the rifle with a practiced ease, and his eyes, visible even from a distance, were cold. "This is private property," Brenda shrieked, stepping fully onto the porch, her voice shrill and accusatory. "You're trespassing. I knew you were up to no good, sneaking around in the dark." Ashley remained still, the small potted marigold still clutched in her hand. She didn't try to run, didn't try to hide. Her quiet strength was her shield. "Brenda, I wasn't sneaking," Ashley said, her voice calm, even in the face of the rifle. "I was just leaving a flower." She held up the small pot for them to see. The man behind Brenda snorted, a low, dismissive sound. "A flower?" His voice was deep and gravelly. "Looks more like an excuse for snooping, Brenda." He stepped forward, out of the shadows, revealing himself fully. He was a large man, with a stern face and close-cropped gray hair. His eyes were hard, and he had a rigid posture, like a soldier standing at attention. He was clearly Brenda's husband, Frank. "See, Frank? She's always causing trouble," Brenda wailed, wringing her hands. "First the lemonade stand, then the park vandals, and now she's lurking on our property. She's a menace." Frank leveled the rifle slightly, not quite aiming at Ashley, but clearly making his presence known. "You heard my wife," he said, his voice slow and deliberate, each word like a heavy stone dropping. "Get off our property. Now. Or we'll have to assume you have ill intent." Ashley took a deep breath. She could feel the cold of the night air, the tension of the moment. She looked at the marigold in her hand, a symbol of peace, now caught in a standoff with a rifle. She decided not to push it. She simply placed the potted flower gently on the edge of the porch, right where it could be seen, then slowly, carefully, turned and walked away, her steps even and unhurried. She didn't run. She didn't look back. She simply walked into the darkness, leaving Brenda and Frank fuming on their brightly lit porch. When Ashley got home, her parents were waiting for her. They had heard the commotion, the bright light, Brenda's angry shouts. "Ashley! What happened? Are you okay?" Sarah cried, rushing to her daughter. Ashley calmly explained about leaving the flowers and Brenda's reaction, including the rifle. Tom's face hardened. "A rifle? This is beyond ridiculous. This woman is completely out of control." He wanted to call the police again, but Ashley shook her head. "It's okay, Dad," she said, her voice surprisingly weary. "They'll just say I was on their property, even if it was for a good reason. It won't help right now." Ashley knew that sometimes, fighting fire with fire only made the blaze bigger. Sometimes, a different approach was needed. The incident with the rifle became the talk of Willow Creek, though often in hushed whispers. Neighbors were openly shocked and worried. Many of them had found Ashley's little potted flowers on their doorsteps that morning, and the simple act of kindness had brightened their day. News of Brenda's extreme reaction to a simple flower, especially with a rifle involved, spread like wildfire. It solidified their belief that Brenda had truly lost her way. People started to avoid Brenda's side of the street, crossing to the other side to avoid passing her house. The tension in the neighborhood was thick, like a heavy blanket that made everyone feel uncomfortable. Brenda, it seemed, was fueled by the fear she was creating. The more people recoiled, the more powerful she felt. She continued her relentless rule enforcement, sending out more fines for minor infractions, scrutinizing every lawn, every mailbox, every pet. She even tried to fine Mrs. Davison for leaving a bird feeder out, claiming it attracted unwanted pests. Ashley immediately stepped in, calmly but firmly explaining to Brenda that Mrs. Davison had special permission from a previous HOA president years ago. Brenda huffed and backed down, but her eyes held a new, colder anger towards Ashley. Ashley, meanwhile, didn't let Brenda's actions stop her from being herself. She continued her quiet acts of kindness. She started organizing a small, informal book-sharing group with some of the neighborhood children, meeting in the Miller's backyard so it wouldn't violate any HOA rules about gatherings in common areas. She encouraged them to read stories about kindness, courage, and standing up for what's right, even when it's hard. She taught them to draw, to be creative, to express themselves. It was a small, gentle rebellion against Brenda's rigid control, a way to nurture goodness in the little ones. One afternoon, while Ashley was helping Mrs. Davison with her computer, Mrs. Davison was trying to learn how to video call her grandchildren. Brenda's official HOA newsletter arrived. It wasn't a friendly note, it was a long, stern document full of new rules and threats of fines. One paragraph, buried deep within the fine print, caught Ashley's eye. It was a new rule about excessive outdoor lighting and unapproved structures, and specifically mentioned any unapproved surveillance equipment. It also stated that all residents must submit a diagram of any external electrical wiring or structures on their property for HOA approval within 30 days. Ashley frowned. This seemed odd, even for Brenda. Why such a specific focus on outdoor lighting and electrical wiring and surveillance? Then, she remembered something that had bothered her earlier in the week. She had noticed some strange small boxes high up on the power poles and streetlights, almost hidden among the wires, near Brenda's house and a few other key intersections. They looked too new, too deliberate to be old utility boxes. They were about the size of a small birdhouse, discreetly painted to blend in. Ashley had a gut feeling about them. They didn't look like simple streetlights. They looked like cameras. Hidden cameras. Later that evening, after dinner, Ashley decided to go for a walk. It was dusk, and the streetlights were just beginning to flicker on. She walked slowly, casually, pretending to be admiring the gardens. As she passed Brenda's house, she looked up. And there it was. High on the power pole directly across from Brenda's front door, almost invisible against the gathering darkness, was one of those small, discreet boxes. Her keen eyes, trained to notice details, saw a tiny, almost invisible lens peeking out. It was definitely a camera. And it wasn't just a regular security camera aimed at Brenda's property. It was angled slightly to capture a wide view of the street, including the miller's house and the public park just a block away. Ashley's blood ran cold. This wasn't just about rules anymore. This was about spying. Brenda wasn't just enforcing rules, she was watching everyone, collecting information, likely looking for any tiny slip-up to use against them. And the new rule in the newsletter? It was probably a way to try and make these hidden cameras seem legitimate, or to force others to reveal their own security setups while Brenda's remained secret. This was a massive invasion of privacy, a truly extreme act of control. Ashley walked home, her mind racing. She felt a deep sense of unease. If Brenda was spying on everyone, watching their every move, then the neighborhood wasn't just tense, it was truly unsafe. This changed everything. It explained how Brenda seemed to know about every tiny thing, every supposed violation. She wasn't just observant, she was actively, secretly, surveilling her neighbors. The next morning, Ashley decided she needed to gather more evidence. She knew she couldn't just tell her parents, because without proof, it would be her word against Brenda's. And Brenda was very good at twisting stories. So, after her parents left for work, Ashley grabbed her small, high-quality camera, the one she used for nature photography, and headed out. She knew she had to be careful, completely unnoticed. This was a dangerous game. She spent the morning walking through the neighborhood, pretending to be taking pictures of flowers and trees. But subtly, carefully, she began to locate more of those hidden cameras. There was one near the community mailbox, another at the entrance to the park, and even one subtly built into a lamppost near the small community pool. Each time, she zoomed in with her camera, taking clear, undeniable photos of the discreet lenses. She felt a growing sense of dread with each new discovery. This wasn't just a few cameras, it was a network. Brenda had turned Willow Creek into her own little panopticon, a place where everyone was watched, but no one knew it. As Ashley was taking a picture of the camera near the community pool, she heard a sound. A car engine. Too close. She quickly lowered her camera and pretended to be adjusting her shoelace. A black SUV, sleek and expensive, pulled up slowly beside her. The window hummed down, revealing Brenda in the driver's seat, her eyes narrowed. And in the passenger seat, sitting rigidly, was Frank, his stern gaze fixed on Ashley. "What are you doing over here, young lady?" Brenda asked, her voice oozing suspicion. "Taking pictures, are we?" "Of what?" Her eyes darted to Ashley's camera. A cold, knowing smirk slowly spread across Frank's face. It was clear they suspected something. Ashley felt a sudden chill, a new kind of danger. She knew she had been caught. "What are you doing over here, young lady?" Brenda asked, her voice oozing suspicion, as the black SUV pulled up beside Ashley. Her eyes darted to Ashley's camera. In the passenger seat, Frank sat rigidly, a cold, knowing smirk slowly spreading across his face. It was clear they suspected something. Ashley felt a sudden chill, a new kind of danger settling around her. She knew she had been caught. Ashley's mind raced, but her face remained calm. She clutched her camera, which still contained the damning photos of the hidden surveillance boxes. "Just taking some pictures," she replied, her voice steady, though her heart beat a little faster. "The light is really nice for flowers this morning." She gestured vaguely at a patch of petunias. Brenda laughed, a short, sharp sound that held no humor. Flowers? Right. And you just happen to be loitering near the community pool, where there are no flowers worth photographing? Her eyes narrowed. Don't lie to me, Ashley. We know you're always up to something. Frank's voice, deep and menacing, cut in. Give us the camera, girl. Now. We're not playing games. His hand twitched, as if he might reach out and grab it. Ashley took a small step back, her grip on the camera tightening. It's my camera, she stated simply. And I haven't done anything wrong. You're trespassing on HOA property while taking pictures. Brenda accused, her voice rising. That's a violation of at least 3 bylaws, Ashley. Give us the camera, or we'll have to call the authorities. Ashley knew they couldn't force her to hand over her private property, but she also knew Brenda would stop at nothing to get what she wanted. And Frank, with his stern face and the memory of the rifle, was a much more immediate threat. She weighed her options. She could run, but the SUV was faster. She could fight, but she didn't want to cause a scene that would confirm their suspicions, not yet. She made a quick decision. There's nothing on here but flower pictures, Ashley said, her eyes meeting Frank's. But fine. If it makes you feel better. With a slow, deliberate movement, she opened the camera's memory card slot, pulled out the tiny SD card, and then, with a flourish, put it in her mouth, pretending to chew and swallow it. Brenda gasped, her jaw dropping. Frank stared, momentarily stunned. What did you just do? Brenda shrieked. Did you just eat it? Ashley smiled faintly, a little bit of mischief in her eyes. Oops, she said, her voice muffled slightly. Looks like I'm hungry for knowledge. She held up the now empty camera, its slot bare. Brenda was speechless with rage. Frank, however, narrowed his eyes. He knew. He could tell by Ashley's calm demeanor, by the slight glint in her eyes, that she hadn't swallowed anything. But he also knew he couldn't prove it. The moment of surprise had passed. He couldn't physically force a girl to throw up a tiny memory card in broad daylight. He let out a frustrated growl. You think you're so clever, don't you? Brenda finally managed to sputter, her face purple with fury. This doesn't change anything. We'll still fine your parents. We'll make sure you can't show your face in this neighborhood again. Frank started the engine, a low rumble. He leaned forward, his voice a low, dangerous growl. You made a mistake, girl. A very big mistake. Don't think this is over. With that, he slammed the car into gear, and the black SUV sped away, leaving Ashley standing alone by the silent pool, her heart still thumping but a small, satisfied smirk on her face. The memory card, safely tucked into a tiny, hidden pocket inside her jacket sleeve, felt reassuringly solid. Ashley walked home, the memory card a warm weight against her skin. She knew Brenda and Frank were furious, but she also knew she had won this small battle. The real fight, however, was just beginning. She had the proof they needed, the undeniable images of the hidden cameras. Now, she just needed to figure out how to use them. She couldn't just post them online. Brenda would deny everything, claim they were fake, and twist the story to make Ashley look like the villain. She needed a plan, a way to reveal the truth that Brenda couldn't escape. That evening, Ashley carefully downloaded the photos from the memory card onto her laptop. She zoomed in on each image, showing the clear lenses, the discrete angles, the strategic placement of each camera. It was chilling to see how thoroughly Brenda had set up her surveillance network. It covered nearly every public space, every major intersection, and certainly every path leading to the Miller's house. Ashley felt a surge of cold anger. This wasn't about community safety. It was about power and control. She showed the photos to her parents, Tom and Sarah, that night. Their reactions were a mix of shock, outrage, and deep worry. She's spying on everyone? Sarah gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. This is illegal. This is an invasion of privacy. Tom's face was grim. This explains so much, he muttered, shaking his head. How she always seemed to know everything. The timing of her finds, it's despicable. He immediately wanted to call the police again, but Ashley stopped him. Wait, Dad. We need to be smart about this. If we just tell the police, Brenda will deny it. She'll say they're security cameras for her own property, even if they're pointed at the street. Or she'll claim they're part of some official HOA security initiative that no one knows about. So what do we do? Sarah asked, her voice tinged with frustration. We can't just let her get away with this. Ashley's eyes held a familiar glint of determination. We expose her. But we do it in a way that she can't deny, and in a way that gets the whole neighborhood on our side, not just the people who already agree with us. She explained her idea, a quiet, carefully planned reveal that would hit Brenda where it hurt the most, her control and her reputation. Over the next few days, Ashley meticulously researched HOA bylaws and local surveillance laws. She learned that while HOAs could install security cameras in common areas, they usually needed a vote from the residents and clear signage indicating surveillance. Brenda had done none of that. She was breaking numerous laws and HOA rules. Ashley also started to subtly talk to other neighbors, not about the cameras directly, but about their general feelings of unease in the community. She listened more than she spoke, letting them voice their frustrations about Brenda's strict rules, the lack of community spirit, and the feeling of being constantly judged. She heard stories of people being afraid to let their kids play outside freely, or even to plant a new rose bush without fear of a fine. She even found out that some residents were starting to consider moving because of the constant tension. It confirmed her belief. Willow Creek was suffering under Brenda's rule, and people were ready for a change. Meanwhile, Brenda seemed to escalate her petty tyranny. Feeling bold after her confrontation with Ashley and believing she had shut down Ashley's investigation, she began enforcing even more absurd rules. She sent out a notice banning lawn ornaments of any kind, even small, tasteful bird baths. She declared a new rule that all garbage cans had to be stored in garages, even on trash collection days, resulting in a flurry of fines for those who left them out too early or brought them in too late. She even put up a new sign at the entrance to Willow Creek, a very official-looking sign that simply read, "Warning, all activities monitored for compliance." It was her way of showing everyone she was still in charge, still watching, still controlling. It made the entire neighborhood feel like a prison. This new sign, however, was a gift to Ashley. It was a public admission that Brenda was indeed monitoring everything, which would make it harder for her to deny the hidden cameras. Ashley knew the time was right. She finalized her plan, a plan that involved a special, unannounced HOA meeting. Ashley decided to collaborate with Mrs. Davison, who, despite her frailty, had a strong network of friends in the neighborhood, many of whom were original residents and secretly disliked Brenda. Ashley explained her plan, showing Mrs. Davison the photos of the hidden cameras and the subtle legal points. Mrs. Davison, her eyes wide with shock and indignation, immediately agreed to help. "This is an outrage, dear," Mrs. Davison whispered fiercely. "We must expose her." Together, they quietly, secretly, began to spread the word. They didn't announce a regular HOA meeting. They announced a community forum to discuss resident concerns and the future of Willow Creek, making it sound important but vague enough not to tip off Brenda. They slipped handwritten invitations under doors, left them in mailboxes late at night, and discreetly handed them to trusted neighbors. They scheduled it for a Saturday morning in the community clubhouse, a place Brenda couldn't easily shut down without looking suspicious. The morning of the meeting arrived, crisp and bright. Ashley felt a mix of nerves and exhilaration. She had a simple presentation prepared, photos of the cameras, copies of the HOA bylaws, and highlights of the legal implications. Her parents were there, looking nervous but proud. Mrs. Davison sat in the front row, a determined glint in her eye. Brenda, of course, was furious when she learned about the unscheduled meeting. She stormed into the clubhouse, Frank trailing behind her, his rifle thankfully absent, but his presence still intimidating. "What is the meaning of this?" Brenda shrieked, her face a familiar shade of angry red. "This is an unauthorized meeting. I declare this meeting adjourned." But the room was packed. More neighbors than Ashley had ever seen at an HOA meeting were there, their faces a mix of curiosity and weary hope. No one moved. Brenda looked around, stunned by the sheer number of people defying her. Ashley, standing at the front of the room, calmly stepped forward. She cleared her throat. "Welcome, everyone," she began, her voice clear and strong, cutting through Brenda's frustrated sputtering. "We're here today to talk about the future of Willow Creek, and about something very important that affects all of us." She then began her presentation, starting with the general feeling of unease in the neighborhood, the constant fines, the stifling atmosphere. She spoke about kindness and empathy, about how a community should feel like a family, not a prison. As she spoke, the murmurs of agreement grew louder. Then, slowly, methodically, she began to reveal the hidden cameras. She put the first image on the projector screen. A clear, zoomed-in shot of the discrete camera lens hidden on the power pole near Brenda's house. The room erupted in gasps and angry shouts. Brenda turned pale. Frank's face went rigid. Before they could react, Ashley moved to the next slide, showing another camera, and then another, detailing their locations and explaining how they illegally invaded privacy. The evidence was irrefutable. Brenda tried to shout over the uproar, to deny it, to claim it was all a misunderstanding, or that the cameras were for security. But Ashley was ready. She displayed the recent HOA newsletter Brenda had sent out, with the new rule about all activities monitored for compliance, showing that Brenda had admitted to widespread surveillance. The murmurs turned into a roar. Accusations flew around the room. The tide had turned. Brenda, cornered and exposed, finally lost it completely. Her face contorted with rage, no longer just the petty tyrant but a truly desperate woman. "This is a witch hunt," she screamed, pointing a trembling finger at Ashley. You started this. You're just a troublemaker." Her eyes darted wildly around the room, full of fear and hatred. "I'm not putting up with this. You're all crazy. Every single one of you." And then, she did something truly unexpected, something that would send a chill through the entire room, turning the anger into stunned silence. She pointed her finger at Ashley, her eyes wide with a terrifying madness, and shrieked something truly shocking, something completely out of context, something that would leave everyone baffled and terrified about what she might do next, something that was clearly a desperate, unhinged threat. "You think you're so tough, don't you? You think you can mess with me? You wait. You just wait until he gets here. He'll show you. He'll show all of you what happens when you cross Brenda Harrison. He's coming to deal with you, and he doesn't play by the rules." Brenda's finger trembled as she pointed at Ashley, her eyes wide with a terrifying madness. "You think you're so tough, don't you? You think you can mess with me? You wait. You just wait until he gets here. He'll show you. He'll show all of you what happens when you cross Brenda Harrison. He's coming to deal with you, and he doesn't play by the rules." A stunned silence fell over the packed clubhouse. The angry murmurs died down, replaced by a collective gasp. Neighbors exchanged confused, terrified glances. Who was he? And what did she mean, "He doesn't play by the rules"? The menacing threat hung heavy in the air. Frank, Brenda's husband, looked as though he wanted to disappear into the floorboards, his face pale. Even he seemed taken aback by Brenda's outburst. Ashley, however, remained calm. Her eyes, instead of showing fear, held a new, intense focus. She watched Brenda closely, then glanced at Frank, seeing the discomfort on his face. She knew Brenda was desperate, flailing wildly now that her secret was out. But the mention of him and not playing by the rules was a chilling note. Before anyone could react, the double doors of the clubhouse burst open with a loud bang. Every head snapped towards the entrance. Standing there, silhouetted against the bright daylight, was a man. He was huge, even bigger than Frank, with a shaved head and a face like granite. He wore a dark, tight-fitting t-shirt that showed off massive muscles, and his arms were covered in tattoos. His eyes, cold and piercing, swept across the room, stopping directly on Ashley. He looked like a force of nature, a living, breathing threat. Brenda let out a triumphant, almost manic laugh. "There he is. See? I told you. My brother, Rex. And he knows how to handle situations." Her voice was dripping with venom, her eyes fixed on Ashley. Rex took a slow, deliberate step into the room, then another. The air grew thick with tension. Neighbors instinctively pulled their children closer. Tom and Sarah moved protectively, subtly positioning themselves slightly in front of Ashley. Rex's gaze never left Ashley, a silent, predatory assessment. "You're the one causing trouble for my sister, huh?" Rex's voice was a low rumble, surprisingly quiet for such a large man, but it carried a chilling weight that made the hairs on people's arms stand up. He began to walk slowly down the aisle between the chairs, his eyes locked on Ashley. Each step felt heavy, deliberate, like a predator stalking its prey. Ashley didn't flinch. She met his gaze directly, her posture relaxed but ready. She had faced intimidating figures before, though never quite like this. Her training kicked in, a quiet humming in her mind, analyzing his gait, his posture, his intent. "Your sister is breaking the law," Ashley stated, her voice clear and unwavering, cutting through the silence. "She's spying on everyone in this neighborhood." Rex let out a mirthless chuckle. "Laws? My sister doesn't need to worry about laws. She has me." He was now only a few feet away from the podium where Ashley stood. His shadow fell over her, immense and menacing. Brenda watched, a triumphant, cruel smirk twisting her lips. "You won't get away with this," Rex growled, taking one final step, until he was right in front of Ashley, towering over her. He raised his hand, a massive fist clenched. It looked like he was about to grab her, or worse. The entire room collectively held its breath, ready to scream, ready to intervene. But just as his hand began to move, something incredible happened. Ashley, without moving her feet, shifted her weight, a subtle, almost imperceptible adjustment of her body. Her eyes, which had been calm, now sharpened, gleaming with an undeniable intensity. A new, powerful aura seemed to emanate from her, no longer just the quiet, kind girl, but something else entirely. Something formidable. Her voice, when she spoke, was no longer just clear, it was deep, resonant, and carried a command that shocked everyone, even Rex. It was a voice used to giving orders, to demanding immediate, precise action. It was the voice of a leader. "Stand down," Ashley commanded, her eyes burning into Rex's, her voice cutting through the air like a laser. It wasn't a plea or a request. It was an order. An order that carried the weight of intense, rigorous discipline. Rex froze. His raised hand stopped in midair. His eyes, which had been so cold and confident, suddenly widened, a flicker of raw surprise, then confusion, then an odd, dawning recognition crossing his face. He stared at Ashley, not seeing just a young girl anymore, but something else, something he had encountered before. His posture, which had been so rigid and threatening, softened just slightly, his shoulders losing some of their aggressive tension. "Brenda," completely oblivious to this subtle but profound shift, shrieked, "What are you waiting for, Rex? Grab her. Show her." But Rex ignored her. His gaze remained locked on Ashley's. He slowly, very slowly, lowered his hand. His jaw was tight, his face etched with a struggle, as if he was trying to figure something out, to put pieces together that didn't quite fit. He took a hesitant half-step back. What did you just say?" Rex asked, his voice no longer a growl, but a rough, almost disbelieving whisper. He was no longer looking at her as a victim, but as an unexpected, formidable challenge, or perhaps even, a superior. Ashley stepped forward, closing the small gap between them, her eyes still locked on his. Her voice dropped slightly, becoming even more intense, a low, firm tone that carried unquestionable authority. "I said, stand down, civilian. You are disrupting a lawful gathering. If you continue to threaten these people, I will be forced to ensure your immediate compliance. You understand?" Her words were precise, direct, using terms that spoke of a very specific kind of training. She spoke not just with confidence, but with the quiet, deadly assurance of someone who knew how to enforce compliance, without needing to raise her voice or even physically touch him. Rex's eyes widened even further. He took another step back, then another, until he was standing a few feet from her, his chest still heaving slightly, but his aggressive posture completely gone. He was no longer looming. He was, listening. And watching. With a mixture of awe and dawning horror. Then, his gaze dropped to Ashley's stance, her almost imperceptible weight distribution, her balanced posture, her steady hands. His eyes moved to her quiet, watchful demeanor. He saw the way she held herself, the way her eyes assessed everything, the way she had subtly disarmed him with just her voice and her presence. The puzzle pieces clicked into place for Rex. His face went utterly white. He recognized it. He knew that look, that stance, that quiet authority. He had seen it in the toughest, most highly trained individuals. He had felt it. "You." Rex finally choked out, his voice barely a whisper, his eyes fixed on Ashley with a profound, almost fearful realization. You train them." He didn't say who "them" was, but the implication hung in the air, heavy and undeniable, understood by at least one person in the room. His mind was clearly reeling. Brenda, confused by her brother's sudden change, stomped her foot. "Rex. What are you doing? He's a big, tough Navy SEAL. He'll make her pay for this." She screamed, her voice piercing the sudden, heavy silence. "He trains them. He trains Navy SEALs." The words hung in the air. "He trains Navy SEALs." The entire room went utterly still. All eyes were on Ashley. The kind, quiet girl who loved flowers and helped old ladies. The girl who had calmly faced a handgun. The girl who had so effortlessly disarmed 4 teenage vandals. Ashley simply looked at Brenda, then at Rex, who now looked absolutely horrified, his face drained of all color, his eyes wide with a dawning, terrible understanding of the huge mistake Brenda had just made. He was no longer a menacing threat. He was a man who had just realized he had picked a fight with someone far, far out of his league, someone who understood his world far better than he understood hers. Ashley then turned her gaze to the assembled neighbors, who were now staring at her with a mixture of awe and disbelief. She didn't smile, didn't boast. Her voice, when she spoke, was calm, clear, and steady, though now it carried a new, undeniable weight. Brenda Harrison has systematically created a climate of fear and illegal surveillance in this community, Ashley said, her voice echoing with authority. She has threatened residents, misused HOA funds, and invaded our privacy. We have the evidence. She gestured to the projector. And she has just admitted that her brother, a Navy SEAL trainer, was brought here to intimidate and deal with residents who oppose her. This is a clear abuse of power, and a direct threat to the safety and well-being of everyone in Willow Creek. The room erupted. Not in shouts of anger, but in a unified roar of outrage, a collective dam breaking. The neighbors, no longer just frustrated, now felt betrayed and endangered. They saw the full picture: Brenda, a petty tyrant, using extreme measures, including potentially a military-trained individual, to control them. The combination of the hidden cameras and the revelation about Rex was the final straw. Brenda's face crumpled. She looked around, her eyes wide, seeing the dozens of furious, determined faces. Her reign of terror was crumbling before her eyes. Frank, seeing the inevitable, put a hand on Rex's arm, pulling him slightly back. Rex, still shell-shocked by Ashley's quiet revelation of her background, didn't resist. He was staring at Ashley as if she was an alien from another planet, or perhaps, a much higher-ranking officer. "We need to vote," Mrs. Davison's voice, surprisingly strong, cut through the noise. "We need to vote on new HOA leadership. And we need to remove Brenda Harrison immediately." A chorus of "yes" and "agreed" filled the clubhouse. Hands shot up in the air, a sea of unanimous support. It was a clear, undeniable vote of no confidence. Brenda, finally understanding that her control was completely, utterly gone, let out a choked cry. Her eyes darted from the angry faces to Ashley's calm, powerful gaze. She saw no fear, only resolute determination. Brenda's shoulders slumped. The color drained from her face, leaving her looking old and defeated. Her brother, Rex, still looking bewildered and chastened, quietly took her arm. "Come on, Brenda," he mumbled, his voice subdued. "Let's go." He practically had to lead her out of the clubhouse, past the furious residents, her head down, her previous bluster completely gone. Frank followed, his face a picture of shame and relief. The grand, intimidating entrance had ended in utter humiliation. As the doors swung shut behind them, a wave of cheers erupted in the clubhouse. People clapped, some even cried tears of relief. The heavy blanket of tension that had suffocated Willow Creek for so long had finally been lifted. Ashley stood at the podium, looking out at the relieved and hopeful faces, a quiet sense of accomplishment in her heart. She had helped her community take back their peace, not with force, but with quiet strength, truth, and a surprising revelation. The reign of HOA Karen was officially over.